Hello everyone, it's Sammy Osman here from the Climate Action Reserve, and welcome to our second workgroup meeting for the Landfill Project Protocol version 5.0. Let's see, looks like we've got almost everyone. So if you could all prepare to mute yourselves on your end, I think Heather is going to unmute everybody to give you all a chance to speak. And then if you could mute yourself, that would be great. And then even when people want to talk, you can unmute yourselves. Okay, let's see. We're getting some feedback already. Sound is excellent. Oh, there we go. It's working well this time. That's good. So I'm using my backup headset. All right. Looks like we've got everybody actually. Fantastic. 100% turnout. All right. Well, I think we can just kick off then, given that we've got everybody. So, yep, welcome once again. And I was just letting everybody know that Heather is about to unmute you all. So if you could prepare to mute yourselves on your end, that would be great. And then you can feel free to unmute when you would like to speak. Let's just run through a little bit of logistics quickly too while we're on this beautiful title page. So you can mute yourselves on your end. You've got that functionality to unmute yourself whenever you like. You've also got a question function there on the little GUI. You can feel free to use that anytime to type in questions. There's also a chat function, so I'm happy for you to use either of those, whatever you see fit. You can also raise your hand, so feel free to use any of those. And I'd like to keep it fairly informal, so we'll try to all keep an eye on anybody raising issues during the meeting, and we can take a look at those if we catch them in time and go through them immediately. If it seems like it might be useful to do so. We've also got time set aside at the end, so we can come back and go over any outstanding issues at that point. And then, as always, we're very welcome your feedback, and we'd be very happy to follow up with you afterwards. Sometimes it's useful to defer a question for various reasons. So we also have that option, and we'll be providing you with our contact details again, although I think everybody already has those. Okay, looks like it seems to be working. Audio is coming through okay. How's the visual? Everybody can see the screen all right? You can see the front page there. Maybe let me know if you can't. If you're having trouble, let me know. Somebody's reached out. Yep, great. Fantastic. Great. Well, thanks again. We really appreciate you guys giving us more of your time. So let's kick off with the meeting. Okay, so here's a simple agenda. I think it's very much like the previous one. We're going to go over a little bit of quick background on the reserve. I think most of you are already going to be very familiar with this material, so we'll probably move through it fairly quickly. We have picked up a couple of extra observers since the last meeting, so welcome to the new folks, and thank you very much for joining us. So we will present a little bit on that background information just to make sure people have that, but we'll move through it relatively quickly. I think we're all very well acquainted / friends already, so we don't need to spend too much time there. And then a little bit on introductions, probably a little bit back to front, but I'll tell you who I am and my colleagues who will be presenting today and helping with the presentation. And then we'll also go through and show a list of the work group participants, so those new observers can get a good sense of who's on the call today and who's contributing to a lot of the good work that's happening here. Then we're going to go through a process overview. So that'll basically be walking back over how we are tackling this update. It'll give you a sort of a recap of what we've done to date, where we are today, and the next steps after that. After that, we're going to get into the substantive updates. We go back through all of the critical issues that we have, critical changes we've made in the draft protocol, which we provided you all a copy of. So there'll be plenty of time to go through each of those in detail, and feel free to reach out and ask questions about any of those or any other issues that we've already made changes on that aren't included in that list of key updates. And also feel free to sort of throw out ideas if you've got thoughts on other ways that we can make things more effective, more efficient, that you haven't raised previously. This is a very good chance to sort of bring to us any ideas that you have. Let me quickly check. Looks like we've got a... Oh, okay, a little bit of feedback that the audio is sort of coming in and out. I think I will try to remain still. Let's see if that helps. If not, let me know again and I can remove the headset. See if that makes a difference. Sorry about that. So key updates. After that, we have time set aside for any feedback, suggestions, questions, any discussion. There'll be time to do that during the meeting, whenever you like, if it seems to fit with the flow. And certainly we'll have time towards the end as well. And then next steps. So that'll be just basically similar to the process overview. We'll just do a quick recap of the key next steps, highlighting key dates for you, highlighting a time frame within which we would be very happy to receive feedback from you, and then also sort of highlighting when we move into the public comment and then when we're celebrating at the end. Background. Okay, so most of you are very familiar with the reserve. For those of you that aren't, we are a non-profit founded in 2001, essentially set up by the state of California to test out a number of key functions in greenhouse gas markets. So first of all, setting up an inventory for companies, and then we moved into setting up a greenhouse gas offsets program, essentially road testing those ideas for the state of California so that they can eventually move into a compliance market. And that did occur a good few years ago. So now we're also working directly with the state of California to help them administer their compliance offset market. And we still maintain a robust voluntary carbon offset market, as well as some other initiatives. So this protocol fits into our voluntary carbon offset program. Some quick stats there. We've got a number of different protocols here and south of the border, hopefully some north of the border too soon enough. And we are just shy of 122 million offset credits issued. A good number issued by folks on the work group. So we've definitely got some very active players in the market with us, helping us on this work. Here's a little quick overview of where we got to, how we got here with respect to this landfill protocol in particular. You can see the work was first, or a version was first published in 2007, and since then we've made various updates. So today is very much part of a sort of an ongoing, I guess, strive towards continuous improvement. So certainly anytime you think, you have some ideas, feedback on things that are working well or not working well, or ways that we can improve the offering here, we're very much open for suggestion all the time. And as you can see, quite regularly we are called to see if we can improve things. That's exactly what we're trying to do today. Okay, introductions. So I'm the second name on there, Sammy Osman, Senior Policy Manager at the Reserve. Let's see, what does it say here? Project Management and Protocol Development Support. Okay, so that's basically saying I'm going to help sort of steer the logistics of this update process, and then also jump in and get to play with the policy materials themselves, a little bit of a policy wonk. And then I'll hand it over to Betty Zavaris, who's the policy associate who's leading this, to say a quick hello. Would you like to say a quick hello, Betty?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. It's good to meet with you again. And hello to the new people that have joined the group and the new observers. I look forward to presenting the PSD, and thanks to everyone for the feedback you've given so far.
Great, thanks, Betty. Yeah, so I'll be handing over to Betty towards the middle end of the presentation, so she can walk you through the hard stuff, the performance standard work. And then we've also got Heather Raven with us today, who's a senior project coordinator. She is assisting with project management and also getting in there and doing a little bit of the technical policy wonk work as well. So would you like to say a quick hello, Heather?
Sure, thanks. Oops, sorry. I'll just use yours. Hi. Hi, everyone. I usually try to fix those types of feedback. So welcome to the work group, and I'm happy to be working on this project. Looking forward to a new landfill protocol. I think it's long overdue, and so I'm excited for this year.
Great, thanks, Heather. And let's see, who else do we have? So here is a list of our work group members. And I'll draw your attention to a little note at the bottom. So our colleagues and friends at the US EPA's Landfill Methane Outreach Program will no longer be acting as a full work group member, but will continue to be observers. So we've always relied heavily on the data and a lot of useful information that they administer in their program, and will continue to do so. I'd like to thank them for their support to date. We won't go through and get everybody to say hello, but the details are all there. And then, if you need to get in touch with each other to discuss things, we can facilitate that. But yeah, thank you very much to all of you. It's been a very active work group, significant amount of feedback to date, including on the new draft already. So very much appreciative of that. It's exactly what we need to be able to expertly inform us to help us with this process. So thank you very much for all of your support thus far. Just got one question. Maybe it's the mic. All right, let me get rid of the mic. How does that sound? Can people hear everything okay still? Yes, hopefully. We've got, yes, great. All right, sorry about that. Tried to use the backup headset that I got free at NACW, but that was, I think, 2 years ago, so it's given up. All right, so again, we've got the list here of everybody that's been very generous with their support, so thank you all. Process overview. Okay, so where are we and how do we get here? So we kicked off ostensibly this process in October of last year, and did so via a public scoping meeting, essentially a webinar very similar to the one we're going through today, which included most of you, as well as an open invitation to the public. A little bit before that, we'd reached out to a lot of you in particular to sort of talk through ideas, and had a lot of suggestions and discussions with our stakeholders, which led us to initiate that process. Shortly after the public scoping meeting, we got in touch with most of you and elicited your support in joining the work group, and we started playing around with some concrete ideas that the vast majority of which came from folks just like yourselves offering up suggestions. So that commenced in about October as well, and then we had our very first work group meeting. Again, it was another webinar in November. And then we continued with the drafting efforts. We got significant feedback from the work group, which was extremely helpful, and led us to substantially change direction in a number of key issues. So we'll go through those today. So again, very, very useful interaction with the work group. So we're very appreciative of that. And then here we are today, the second work group meeting. So today we're going to go over some of the changes that we've provided to you in a draft protocol itself. So we'll have a good chance to go through each of those critical changes, and then also continue to elicit feedback on those issues, as well as anything else that you'd like to provide that feedback on. And then we'll go through towards the end, but hopefully we'll be able to get some further feedback from yourselves if you would like to, if you see the need to, and then from there we will again look to revise the protocol, the draft, to incorporate that feedback. We'll flag for you a couple of issues which we're actually still working on, in particular the performance standard. We're still making refinements there, including directly in relation to feedback that we've already received from you. So again, very useful. And then we're aiming to go into a public comment period. So after the we ostensibly complete our interactions and deliberations with you all, we will finalise a draft and take that to the public and offer the wider public an opportunity to weigh in and provide their thoughts and feedback. And we're hoping to do that by commencing a 30-day public comment period around about the first week of February. I think looks pretty reasonable. And then somewhere in between, in that 1 month period, we will have a public comment meeting, another webinar just like today's, which will be open to the public, and it'll be a chance for us to go through all of the key changes similar to what we're doing today, as well as, I guess, we could address any feedback that we've received at that point, but usually it comes a little bit later. And then from there, once the public comment period is completed, we reply to any public comments publicly. So we post our assessment analysis and sort of any changes we made in relation to public comments that's received, and we'll continue to revise the draft. And then we're hoping to take this draft to our board for them to adopt it and publish it as an active protocol in April of this year. So essentially, we're kind of midway in the process, but a lot of the hard work will be done in the next couple of weeks, and then essentially, hopefully, we'll be sort of bringing it home from there through that public comment process. So again, there's plenty of time for us to take a good look at ideas that you have. This is probably the last really substantive chance to weigh in on critical issues. So very much welcome your feedback again. Work group expectations. We probably don't need to go through these, but yes, again, you've been a very active work group, exactly what we would ask for, and we don't always get it, so very much appreciative. Key updates. All right, let's get into it. Let's see, what have we done? Okay, so this is a very similar list to what we saw before. I've highlighted in red for you the issues that are perhaps most critical, sometimes because you haven't seen those yet or because it's the fanciest. Let's see, so the project definition, we proposed a change to allow for an expansion of an existing project and an existing landfill into new cells to optionally be considered a brand new project as opposed to simply an expansion of an existing project. The previous protocol, version 4.0, the most up-to-date version, allows for expansions into new cells, but they are considered part of the original project. So some feedback was received from workgroup members that it might be useful to allow project developers to optionally ask that an expansion into a new cell be considered a new project. So we thought that was a good idea, ran that past the work group, and we have included that in the draft. I think there were a couple of requirements that we put in there, essentially that hopefully gas doesn't migrate and whatnot. But actually, this is just a summary. I'm just remembering. So we'll go through those details in the following slides. So maybe I should just cut to the chase. So the second one here, crediting period. The idea here was to allow for a second crediting period, and we will also put in place a mechanism that could facilitate projects being able to take advantage of that, even though their first crediting period had finished and they hadn't sort of done so promptly at the end of their first crediting period. So a typical mechanism we use is that at the end of the first 10 years, a project must ask for a second 10 years within the last 6 months of their first 10-year period. Here we've relaxed that a little bit, taking into consideration that we have a good number of projects which weren't able to make use of that mechanism, and so we've got a transition period built into this concept of allowing for a second period. We'll go through the details a little bit further, but the text is in black here, which is indicating that no substantive changes were made from the last work group meeting. We essentially locked that in. Performance standard test. So Betty is going to go through with you in a good amount of detail towards the end of this presentation where we've come to in terms of the performance standard test. as well as outlining to you a couple of extra steps that we're hoping to do to refine it a little bit further. But that will be a good part of the presentation later on. So here a flag for you, the legal requirement test. We have removed the local NMOC threshold. So we'll go through that in detail in a moment, but that's a change that you did not see in the previous work group discussion, work group presentation. So you should pay particular attention there in the presentation as well as in the draft. That's new material for you. Again, with the monitoring section, we've also got a new change here, which wasn't provided to you previously. So this is in the draft, but we did not go through this in the last meeting. Here we've introduced a new optional indirect monitoring alternative. So we'll go through and spell out the details there in just a moment. And then finally, verification. We locked in one single option there, one single alternative. I think previously we'd talked about maybe 4 new ideas, and in the end we've chosen one. A very simple concept that should still nonetheless add some flexibility compared to where we're starting from. Again, we'll go through the details in just a moment. And then here, this is a summary of essentially a whole bunch of updates that we've made, but we're bringing these over from our other parts of the program and also from the compliance offset program from the California government. So there's quite a few changes here, but I think they're all pretty straightforward. And if you're familiar with the program or the compliance program, you should be familiar with most of these ideas. In red, sort of highlighting for you that we had proposed to remove a requirement for quarterly cleaning and inspection of monitoring equipment. We walked back on that idea a little bit here, and we are maintaining the requirements that we've had in version 4.0 and the rest of our program. And then again, we did not remove the requirement to calibrate handheld devices to a known gas prior to each use either. We did get a lot of good, robust feedback on both of those ideas. And as a result of that and deliberations, we have removed those proposed updates. So we will be maintaining status quo for those. Otherwise, all the rest of the changes here are essentially incorporating updates that we've made and lessons learned from other methane protocols, including the compliance offset protocols for the California. And then the last note here, updating default factors, as in have not done that yet, but definitely intend to. All right, let's get into the specifics. Project definition. Again, this is exactly as we saw it last time. Essentially, we're talking about here an option that's available in 4.0 and the earlier versions. That is that you can expand your existing project into new cells. The key change here is that we are giving you project developers the opportunity to have that be treated as a brand new project as opposed to an extension, physical extension of their existing project. So the key implication there is that if you made that expansion and you decided to opt for the new project, you would essentially get a 10-year crediting period for that new cell, as opposed to that new cell being incorporated as part of the existing project, which presumably would be partway through a 10-year period. So that's the key change there. We're including the flexibility of allowing projects potentially to share common destruction devices. So obviously that might get a little bit tricky in terms of monitoring the gas. So we would have to make sure that the monitoring is adequate for us to be able to distinguish between those different flows to those different devices. And then a very simple update with respect to regulatory requirements, regulatory compliance, essentially putting the onus on project developers to demonstrate that any regulatory compliance problem at the landfill does not spill over into any of those multiple projects that might be operating there. I think it's a pretty reasonable, simple assumption, which can be rebutted if needed. And then one other thing I think which is not noted here is that I think the language in there requires that there be no migration between cells, which might not be very practical. So it might not be such a major update. And again, if we're going to treat these as separate projects, then we would need to be able to distinguish between the gas flows in the various projects. So that might be a sort of a limiting a factor, practically speaking. Yep, feedback welcome anytime, but I think most of you have already had a chance to consider this, and you will see that what we have here in the draft is essentially the same as what we proposed earlier. Crediting period, let's see. Okay, so first of all, we are allowing for a second crediting period. Essentially, a crediting period is 10 years. So here we are allowing for optionally to apply for a second crediting period for another 10 years. Betty will walk through with you the key changes we've made to the performance standard test, but essentially we're making significant changes there, which will remove a barrier that has prevented a lot of projects from being able to apply for a second crediting period under version 4.0. Those projects will now have the opportunity to move up to version 5.0 of the protocol and start a new crediting period under version 5.0 if we can get it across the finish line in April, which we're hoping to do. And then, as I said, we've also got a simple look back period mechanism that we've drafted out, and I think you've all seen this already, which essentially, there's quite a number of projects who are sort of coming to the end of their period or may have dropped off, finished their crediting period already, and normally those projects would have been required to move up or optionally move up to a second crediting period within 6 months of the end of that period. Because that wouldn't be possible for a lot of folks, we've got this look back period mechanism. So essentially the way that works is we'll say, the way it's currently drafted is as soon as the protocol is adopted, you all have 6 months to apply for a second crediting period. And if you do so within 6 months of the date the protocol is adopted, then essentially we're able to sort of overlook any break in continuous reporting. So if for some reason, let's say the project finished in 2018 or 2017, you would be able to apply to have a second crediting period. And I think we also included a 2-year limit on that look back period. So that might be another critical issue to look at. In other words, if you stopped continuous reporting within the last 2 years of when that's adopted, that's an opportunity to, that's the window of opportunity for which you can opt to move up. I think we are going to be exploring maybe increasing that 2-year window a little bit to maybe allow some more opportunity for projects that might have stopped a little bit earlier. And let's see, 2 notes there to the bottom, and I do see a question, so I'll get to that in just a sec, but let's see. Okay, so the requirement to use that look back period is essentially to submit 1 or more 0 credit reporting periods for any period in between. So those of you not familiar with a 0 credit reporting period, that's essentially a really simple mechanism by which you can tell us exactly what's happened during that downtime that you had. So if you had 2 years of downtime, you would submit 1 or more documents, which just gives us some very basic reporting data on what happened in those 1 or 2 years, so we can make sure nothing untoward happened at the landfill. And then you would hopefully be able to then move up and start a new crediting period. It's worth noting that we're also exploring a similar option outside of this update process for projects that might still be going through their initial crediting period. So this mechanism is basically, if you've finished your 10 years and you want more, come and use this mechanism. It doesn't also accommodate projects that are still in their first crediting period and have not maintained continuous reporting. Heather, in particular, is working on a mechanism that would potentially be able to support projects who are still within the first 10 years but didn't maintain continuous reporting. So I would encourage you to reach out to myself, Betty, or directly to Heather and and we can make sure you have that information. And we know a number of the entities on the call today have already started those discussions and are interested in something like that. So please feel free to reach out. And lastly, before we get to the question, this is just informal practical guidance. If there are projects out there that wish to take advantage of this, then it would probably be best to continue to maintain your monitoring of data as if you were still going through reporting and verifications, just so you have the data there in case we need it. And also it'll help support writing up of zero credit reporting periods if needed, and also maintaining associated QA/QC. That would just minimize your risks and maximize the chance for projects to be able to come in and pick up a second crediting period. So that's just to sort of ensure you have the best chance of moving forward under a 5.0 and a second crediting period. Just take a quick look at questions. Yes, the question here, does this apply to projects recently listed as completed? Yes, it does. So if you have a project, or if you're aware of a project that has recently been completed, if the project, the way the draft is currently written is that if the project finished its first crediting period within the last 2 years of when the protocol's adopted, so let's say April within April 2017. If the protocol project finished any time between then and when the protocol's adopted, then you would have the opportunity to apply for a second reporting period. And for any of the period in between when you apply and when you stopped reporting, those would be covered by one or more zero credit reporting periods. So some minimal reporting about what went on during that downtime, and then you would be invited to make such an application within 6 months of the protocol being adopted. So basically, as long as you get it in before October of 2019, you should be fine, and hopefully we'll be able to work together and accommodate such projects being able to get a second crediting period under version 5.0. Very welcome to reach out anytime if you want to talk through specifics about individual projects. We're very happy to sort of start facilitating that process, even though we're not quite there in terms of the protocol. And again, very basic guidance at the bottom here is put yourself in the best position by hopefully just continuing to gather data and continuing to do your QA/QC. Might not strictly be necessary, but it's probably the best way to ensure you're able to take advantage of this opportunity if we get it written into a final protocol. Okay, no more questions, but again, feel free to reach out towards the end, or we can log further questions, and certainly very happy to follow up with you one-on-one afterwards as well. Legal requirement test. So this is something new that you didn't see in the last meeting. Essentially, as part of our legal requirement test, the very basic premise with the legal requirement test is that if there's any laws mandating the specific activities that we're crediting for, then those activities will be considered business as usual. And in other words, the offsets aren't driving that action. So those projects would not be eligible for crediting. That's the general premise. So we did have a section in here referring to local NMOC thresholds. So not the federal ones, those are as they were, but there was a additional layer on the local level which said essentially, NMOC emissions thresholds that were developed to address projects at landfills where the treatment of LFG for NMOCs was mandated, but LFG destruction was not the only treatment option. In other words, at the local level, if there were mandates in place to control NMOCs, but they sort of left open how that was to be done, then this mechanism provided a couple of thresholds. So we did a bunch of analysis and we had some thresholds, and essentially each project was required to, if that requirement was triggered by local laws, was required to demonstrate that they met those thresholds. So the two thresholds in question was total mass, that should be flow instead of low, apologies, hang on, there's two typos there. So that should be flow of NMOC, not low of NMOC for LFG control systems. was greater than the threshold in question, the project would not be eligible. So there was 2 levels there for sites which had, for which closed flares were not required by law. The threshold was 1,775 pounds of NMOC per month. And then if closed flares were required by law, the threshold was a little bit higher. We did have work group feedback, which triggered us to then go off and do some independent research. And both of those pointed out to us essentially that the rationale underlying this mechanism was perhaps no longer justified, no longer there. So for that reason, we thought it appropriate to remove both of those thresholds. So you can see that's probably going to affect projects in potentially positive ways, or potentially making things a little bit more restrictive. And highlighted in red here, projects subject to closed flare mandates at the local level will no longer be eligible. So that's obviously one of the adverse outcomes here, potentially, if you have one of those projects. But otherwise, it should make it a little bit easier for some projects, removing one of those extra layers. We don't think that there will be too many projects that will be adversely affected by this. Please do reach out if you want to talk it through, or you have a specific project that you think needs to be considered a little bit further. But as I said, this is a change that we didn't go through last time. So take a good look at the draft and make sure you're aware and comfortable of it. No questions, so we'll keep moving. Just do a quick time check. Okay, plenty of time. That's good. All right, and this is another new change that you didn't see last time. So this was staff-driven, I believe, this one. So I think most of you are pretty familiar with our monitoring requirements. Essentially, we ask that you provide actual continuous flow data, and then also methane concentration data, and then you also demonstrate destruction activity of each of your destruction devices. And it's only when we have all 3 of those present that you're able to get offsets for that destruction. So what we've proposed here is an optional alternative where instead of directly monitoring and metering flow, you might instead point to output from the destruction device and use that as a proxy for demonstrating the volume of gas that was destroyed, and therefore the emission reductions that the project would be entitled to. So let's go through this step by step. So instead of using flow meters, you may be able to present to us a method to use destruction device output data. Output must be measured using a commercial transfer meter. What we mean by that is a meter used to measure output for energy delivery contracts. So essentially like a utility grade meter in essence. And then from there, just a few sort of general best practice caveats. You must propose an appropriate conversion method. And as an example, we've given brake specific fuel consumption calculations. We have seen projects use that alternative previously, both in our program and the compliance offset program, to various degrees of success. So that's given here as an example of one type of method that a project developer may wish to utilize. And then just to simplify things, we would suggest or request that if a party wanted to take advantage of this option, that they set out a very clear method to do so in their monitoring report, that they apply that single method consistently throughout the reporting period. So, not sort of jumping back and forward between different methods would be ideal. And then demonstrate to the verified satisfaction that in the particular circumstances of that project, the use of that data and that method was reasonable, and then also that it results in a conservative estimation of volume of methane destroyed. So, there might conceivably be ways to manipulate such methods to inflate CH4 values. So, we'd be looking closely at the method proposed and taking guidance from our frontline verifiers to make sure that the specifics that are being proposed are reasonable in the circumstances. So yeah, I would suggest take a good look at that. language in the protocol, and please do get in touch if you have ideas about how to improve it, or you think it's a positive, useful step, or if you feel a little bit uncomfortable with it. Yeah, this is a new concept. We have not used this in our program before, nor is it incorporated into the compliance offset protocol. So this is a relatively new concept. So for that reason, your attention and any feedback on this issue would be likely very useful indeed. All right, let's go on to verification. So this was an option proposed previously, one of several. This is the only option that we've included now. So essentially projects have a choice of either getting verified every year, or projects can defer and essentially go for a verification basically every 2 years, with the idea being that if you deferred, then you would only get issued credits once you came back in for your verification. You would get credits for those 2 years worth. So it's, ostensibly a chance to perhaps save on costs, be more cost effective for any given reason. There wasn't an imperative to apply for credits in 1 year, or the credit volume was perhaps a little bit low and the value wasn't quite there. This gives you a simple mechanism to defer, and then similarly with a site visit, in essence, you could have a site visit every second time around, and have a desktop verification in between. So take a good look at that. We certainly did get a fair bit of feedback from a range of different stakeholders on this mechanism, and this was the preferred simple method to offer a lot more flexibility, but not quite as much as some of the ideas that we'd floated and explored. So very much welcome your feedback there as well. Okay, so let's see. I think we'll hand over to Betty at this point, who's going to walk you through all of the significant work she's done on updates to the performance standard test. So I'm going to hand over the keyboard and mouse to Betty. Did that work? Yeah. There we go. All right, and then I'll mute myself and Betty will take it from here, and I will join you again a little bit later.
Thank you, Sammy. We're testing here if I have the ability to move the slides first. Oh, yeah, I think, was that you or, oh, yeah, okay, cool. I think I do have it.
Oh, you did it? I think that was both of us. Got it? Well, let me know if you need me to move it. I'm happy to do this as well.
Okay, thanks. All right, thanks, Sammy. And so I'll be going over our new approach for the performance standard test. Once again, I want to thank everyone for the feedback you've given us. It was key for developing this new approach. It was really good to see that many work group members agreed in several aspects, and some of them are the ones that I'm showing here in this slide. This slide doesn't show all the comprehensive feedback that we received, but I feel this is a summary of some key messages that helped us define this new performance standard test. One was that, yes, natural gas is relevant, but it's not the whole picture. As you recall, our previous approach was, can we use natural gas as a proxy for determining at what point of the gas price projects are no longer additional? What we learned from your feedback is that that was reducing or simplifying the market too much, and that there were many other aspects that we needed to consider, including incentives, tax breaks, even if the landfills were public or private, or the age of the landfill, the waste, etc. So we decided to move away from that approach and to try to think about the market more broadly. So that assessment still helps for one type of project, but we wanted to think about LFGE projects on a broader perspective. Something that was recurrent across feedback was also that project like feasibility and markets for projects depend very significantly depending on the end use of the gas. So most of the feedback we received was either for high BTU projects, medium BTU projects, or electricity projects. So we took that as a pointer to say, let's assess projects differently depending on the specific product that they're generating. It's different to think about electricity than gas for thermal capacity or gas for fuel use in vehicles or for the pipeline. So from now on, we're working on thinking of these LFG projects by how they're the final product that they're generating. Another feedback was that some of you provided us was to consider investment analyses, think about the point at which these projects become feasible and the point at which they require or not incentives. So you will see that electricity projects, we are assessing part of them partly on this approach. Then many of you also brought the idea of think of incentives, and that the most relevant programs currently driving LFGE projects, at least at the federal level, are the Renewable Portfolio Standard, the Renewable Fuel Standard, and the Low Carbon Fuel Standard. So we took a look at those and how they're impacting projects. Some feedback was that landfill projects in the absence of these programs were less likely to exist, and that whenever a project is being assessed for feasibility, they're basically thinking, which one of these programs do we want to be a part of? So we looked at your feedback, but also did some research to see how these programs were impacting new project development. And then, of course, something, a final comment that is also in line to our approach for version 4.0 was that larger landfills are likely not additional just due to economies of scale. So we are trying to say, okay, let's focus on the small and medium-sized landfills and think of at what point do these at what scale are they no longer additional? So yeah. Based on this, we now developed this new approach of to consider three factors for assessing additionality. One is what is the end use? And as I mentioned, we divided projects between high BTU, medium BTU, and electricity. High BTU are those that are compressing the gas and injecting it either to the pipeline or using it for vehicles. Medium BTU projects are those that are not compressing the gas, but using it for its thermal capacity and delivering it to a facility that uses it for its processes, either, let's say, a boiler or a greenhouse or some other type of industrial process that requires the gas for heat. And then finally, another category was projects used for electricity. Mainly, the main types of electricity projects are direct combustion engines or turbines or microturbines. And we looked at what sizes of each types of these projects, what capacity they have, and at what capacity they become feasible. Then the second factor is what does the market look like for each type of project? And by this, first we looked at what is their penetration rate, are they a common practice or not, and what are the incentives that these projects are most commonly receiving. And finally, if the first two steps weren't enough to help us assess if the projects were business as usual, we did a financial assessment to answer the question of at what capacity a project reaches feasibility in the absence of incentives. And this is we did it basically only for electricity. So here we can see step 2, the penetration rates. Here on the left, we see a pie chart of all the landfills available in the LMOP database. And we are taking the proportion of the landfills that have at least one project, what type of project do they have? And we see that medium BTU and high BTU represent 3% and 1% respectively, and electricity are 14% of all landfills have at least one electricity project. So if we think that the line that draws common practice or not is 5%, we see that high BTU and medium BTU are not, and electricity is a common practice. And then here is the part, still looking at the second factor of our assessment. What are the drivers for each type of project? High BTU project, this was a very consistent feedback we got from Workgroup members and from the research we did, is that right now the market is favoring these types of projects. The incentives are highly attractive to develop these kinds of projects. We made a calculation, like $58 are for each ton of CO2 equivalent is what these projects are receiving, which in comparison to greenhouse gas offsets, an offset is $1 per ton of CO2 equivalent. So clearly these projects are driven by RFS and LCFS, and we believe that given the market conditions, these projects, although not a common practice, are business as usual. And another pointer that helped us reach this conclusion is that more than half, 60% of the planned projects for 2019 and on are RNG projects. So we see that that's where the market is headed. On the other hand, medium BTU projects, we feel like first these projects are the ones that we can assess most closely with the natural gas analysis we did previously. As we showed you in the last meeting, natural gas prices are now currently at low levels, which makes natural gas more attractive than these types of projects. So we also didn't find clear incentives that are driving these projects, and we also found that the feasibility of these projects depends a lot on how close or how far they are from this facility that would require the gas. So we believe that given all these indications, these projects do require incentives and could benefit from greenhouse gas offsets. And then finally, electricity projects. These have a much more complex market. It was difficult to think of one single number, like in high BTU projects that would tell us, oh, this is how much each project is receiving. It's highly regional. But most of the indications and research that we found, one really helpful source was the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory report from 2017 that showed this graph. That what it's saying here is most of the states are already meeting their RPS obligations, and they're doing it either with RECs or renewable electricity capacity. And in the future, they will, if they extend their RPS goals, they'll continue to meet them, yes, by increasing their renewable energy capacity, but also by banked RECs. And the report points to the fact that we are currently facing maybe oversupply of RECs, and RECs are therefore lowering their values. And so in general, it wasn't as clear how helpful RPS right now is for driving projects. Yes, it is. It may be more in some regions than others. So but in any way, electricity projects, we had already identified that they weren't, they are a common practice, so we needed to keep looking pay closer attention to these types of projects to see if we could draw a line within electricity projects. So this table here summarizes those first two questions that we answered. Are projects a common practice? Meaning, what is their penetration rate? High BTU and medium BTU are not. They are below 5% of all landfills have either a high BTU or medium BTU. But electricity projects, yes, they are. 14% of landfills have an electricity project, so it's a common practice. Same here, that we see clear market drivers. High BTU projects do have clear market drivers. The RINs are super valuable for these projects. Medium BTU, we didn't find one. We believe they require offsets. And electricity projects, it wasn't super clear. So we were able to conclude that at this level of analysis, that high BTU is business as usual, medium BTU is not, and electricity projects are, but we can further analyze to draw a more clear line of a more clear threshold for eligibility under the protocol. So with this, we moved on to doing a financial assessment only for electricity projects. And the question we seek to answer was, at what electricity generation capacity do projects become feasible in the absence of incentives? And to answer this question, we used LMOP's landfill energy cost model, which I'm showing here in this box. It's not, of course, we cannot read it, but I wanted to show the image. The two boxes on the left are basically the input data that we can put per landfill. And then here on the right, the model shows outputs. And the most relevant outputs for us were financial indicators such as net present value, the number of years that it takes to recover investment, etc. And also the model suggests an electricity generation capacity depending on the gas available. And what we did there, rather than using these generation capacity as an output, we manually adjusted the flow on the left side of the inputs so that we would get the output that was the same as the real LMOP data. So we based the financial assessment based on the capacity of the project and the flow. So we later learned that if we assume infinite gas supply, really we could have done without the randomly selected projects, but we wanted to make sure that we were using real data and that we were not inventing, like landfill situations. So instead we selected 120 randomly projects randomly, and we ran them through this model and gradually increase. Like we selected them based on gradual incrementation of their electricity generation capacity, and then we identified at the point at which a landfill was profitable and gave us positive financial returns. Okay, so here I'm showing you some of the default values that we used in the analysis. These are basically what the model already comes with. We didn't modify them. We are assuming a loan for the investment, a loan of 10 years, an interest rate of 10%, inflation rates of 2 to 2.5%, a discount rate of 8%, and that the landfill would be able to give a down payment of 20%. We're assuming no tax credits, no REC revenue. The only revenue for the project is the sales of the electricity. And this price came already in the model. It's the national average price we obtained from Energy Information Administration, and it's It's a set of data like projected prices for electricity, and actually for 2019 it's 0.061. So it didn't vary. Like this value was for 2017, but it's still the same for 2019. And also assuming the product price escalation rate would be of 1% per year. And other defaults were related to methane generation, like methane content in the landfill, destruction efficiency, etc. So this was the same for all projects. And the values that changed per landfill were these. We using LMOP data per landfill, we specified the year the landfill opened, the year the landfill closed, and the area of the well field that would feed gas to the project, how much waste in place, and the year that the waste in place was calculated. And all this data helped the model give how much flow would be available as output. But as I mentioned previously, it wasn't as relevant because we were manually specifying the flow so that we would get the project capacity equal to what was the real case in real life in LMOP. We also specified project type. The vast majority of projects were gensets, very few turbines, micro turbines there. Most of the projects were that. We used a marginal tax rate of 21% for private projects and 0% for public. So we basically had 60 private projects and 60 public, and they each have a different threshold for feasibility. We also assumed that all projects had a collection and flaring system already in place before the project started. So we are assuming sunken costs for this, like the initial investment is not including the costs of installing the wells, the pipes, etc. So it's basically installing the combustion system, the genset. And then we are assuming all projects started in 2019. And as I mentioned, project size was the real value, and we adjusted flow with grade so it would give us the project size we wanted. And here I'm showing a snapshot of the results. Each row here is one landfill. The columns in blue are the LMOP values, and the columns in yellow are outputs. So we can see in this column, the second on the right, the point at which in red are landfills that still have a negative net present value, and the ones in green have a positive net present value, and we cross the threshold for public projects at 4 megawatts. The same thing we ran for public projects, and we crossed the threshold at 6 megawatts. This is actually different to what you saw in the protocol because when we sent you the document, we were still running the model through the 21% tax rate. So because the model had originally come with a 35% tax rate, so we reduced it to equal the 2018 new tax rate. And so with this new going from 35 to 21, we now reach a threshold at 6 megawatts for private projects. So with this analysis, we finalized the financial assessment for electricity projects, and we were able to reach these performance standard tests. So projects that would be eligible now under the Landfill 5.0 protocol would be privately owned projects up to an installed capacity of 6 megawatts, publicly owned projects up to a capacity of 4 megawatts, and all direct use projects. Like all these projects would be able to list under the protocol, and the projects that would not be eligible would be privately owned projects above 6 megawatts, publicly owned projects above 4 megawatts, and all high BTU projects. With this now, we've now, I feel like we've developed an approach, an analysis methodology. The next steps will be to incorporate the feedback you give us. We've already received feedback from some of you that we'll be looking at, and also do some research ourselves to be able to refine these assumptions. For example, does it make sense to assume a loan? Does it make sense to assume no RECs for electricity projects? Do we want to think about incentive assumptions and any other type of assumptions? And based on this, the threshold will very likely shift, but we hope that we can keep this approach. And now that we will likely not do modeling of specific landfills in this step, we'll probably set assumptions and just change the flow until we reach the threshold, and just keep record of all the different scenarios that we're modeling to identify different levels of eligibility. So with this, I finished my presentation of the PST, and yeah, I welcome any questions as well. And I'll pass you the presentation, Sammy.
Great, thanks, Betty. Fantastic. So yeah, just a quick recap. Betty walked you through there the specifics in terms of the methodology, updated, revised methodology that we have for the performance standard test, as well as the results that we'd like to present you at this point in time. And then Betty also highlighted she's actually still going to do significant more work on refining the methodology itself. We already have received significant feedback from Workgroup, which is very helpful, very useful feedback, which is going to help us refine some of the LFG cost model inputs. And then we're also going to be looking further at the range of incentives that are available for electricity projects in particular. So we anticipate those results that we presented in the table will most likely be pretty close to where things finish up, but there might be some changes towards the edge of those thresholds. So yeah, we very much welcome you to take a good look through that. Appendix A has the methodology spelt out in detail, and I think Betty also provided you with Excel table, so you can go in there and look at some of those results and play around with them yourself. So good feedback already, and certainly very welcome for you to provide additional feedback as you see fit. And then again, any feedback on any of the issues we've gone through today would be very welcome. Would encourage you to take a look at the draft. You have both a cleaned up version, or if you're interested, you have a red line version, which will draw your attention to all of the changes we've made, so you can easily see exactly what those are. I think we also provided you with a summary of changes, which is, you know, a little bit less in terms of the detail, but can draw your attention to the changes. And then, as always, if you have ideas that aren't already captured or discussed, don't be shy. Feel free to present us with any sort of new material or concepts, and we'd be very, very happy to consider those. I think now's the time to air any of your insights and advice, or you know, if it goes through, you will have to hold your peace for probably a few years before we get the chance to play with it again. So feedback is definitely very much welcome. Let's see, what else do we have? All right, next steps. So from here, we are hoping that we can receive feedback that you'd like to provide, especially in writing, but calls are also very welcome, within 1 week of today. that's ideal. That's the ideal scenario. So we can then sort of concentrate on making those refinements and preparing the final touches for presentation to the public. But certainly, if you wanted to take a little bit more time, reach out and let us know, and we can help work through issues. Or you can also you'll have the opportunity to provide feedback during the public comment period, of course, as well. And then any comments, if you choose to make comments publicly, then you'll be treated just like any other members of the public, and we'll provide a written response to all written comments received during the public comment period. So that's our wish list in terms of sort of time frame for when we get your feedback, and then from there, probably makes sense to try to get the protocol finalised and out to the public somewhere in the next couple of weeks. So probably the week of February the 4th, and then maybe kick off with a public comment meeting the week after that, or somewhere in the next couple of weeks after that, we would have a public comment meeting. So again, you would be very much welcome to join us for submitting comments during that period, and or joining us for the webinar to see where things have evolved from today's meeting. Here's our contact information. Please feel free to reach out anytime, in particular to Betty or myself. I think you also have Heather's details. Betty and I are tasked with most of the sort of technical work, so feel free to reach out to us anytime, or Heather can relay information as well if you prefer to speak to her. We're both on the West Coast, so I tend to start really early and finish relatively early, and then Betty's the night owl, so you can probably catch us anytime, but Pacific is ideal, Pacific business hours. So that's it. It doesn't look like we have any further questions at this point. So you have our details. And we'd like to thank you all for your time and attention. Looks like we'll probably finish up a lot earlier than our scheduled time today. So we can probably wrap things up at this point, and would encourage you all not to be shy. Please pick up the phone if you'd like to have a chat, or shoot us an email, and we can interact via email and or schedule a call with yourselves to talk things through. So yeah, thanks Betty, and thanks Heather, and I think we can probably wrap things up. Thanks everybody.